Welcome to Beyond the News, friends. I'm Jim Grant. You can check out our rebroadcasts and website at beyondthenews.co.uk. Coming up on this week's show will be some videos and some news articles that I haven't had a chance to load up yet because I've been so happy to welcome on our guest this week. We were just getting into the idea of modern monetary theory, as he likes to call it, Christian Riley, and I can think of no better sort of name for that. So welcome back, Christian. How are you? All right?
I'm good.
Lovely. So
great to be talking to you.
Last week's show we were talking about how banks create money out of nothing, and when we say banks, that's central banks, and the second part of that theory is mortgages. Have you heard? I don't think that's come into the mainstream, or at least admitted by central banks yet, that private institutions create mortgages out of nothing. And so we've got you're aware of that sort of scenario where you've effectively got governments say to certain private bank groups, here you go, here's literally a license to print money as long as you don't go above a ratio of something like 9-to-1 or something like that, and that ratio has been extended. So banks create money out of nothing, both central and private, which I think is even more of an amazing scam. And the idea that how austerity is a complete farce. But before we go on to that, Christian, would you, for someone who is a complete layman, and I said, listen, you want to know about modern monetary theory, the idea, and I'll say that quote again for you, from the Bank of England, saying they stated outright that most common assumptions about how banking works are simply wrong. If you were to be able to sum it up in a couple of minutes to a complete layman who's never heard what we've been moaning on about for years, for which we were proved right on in March when the Bank of England let out the cat out the bag in a paper called Monetary Creation in Modern Economy, how would you sum up to people to ring the alarm to say, attention ladies and gentlemen, there's something about money that you need to know? What is it that you would say to them, Christian Riley?
Okay, it's a good question. I think the headline would be, money is created out of thin air by governments. Hopefully that would get their attention, or they might just think, well, you're a lunatic, so you have to unpack that a bit. And I think a great place to start is I would go onto iTunes and look at the Reform the Money podcast series. I know you've listened to it, Jim. I have. Stephanie Kelton gives a talk. She's a professor at the University of Kansas City, Missouri, and she gives a talk called "Can Government Spend Without Limit?" And it lasts an hour, and it's very good right from the beginning. And I'll try and praise it, but I implore people to go to the source and check me, check my fact checking.
Yeah.
But anyway, it goes something like this: the ideas that they've come up with as modern monetary theory are not theoretical. For starters, they're just describing what's happening using accounting identities. Like this is the public sector, this is the private sector, this is government, and so it's not, the ideas have been around for a long time, centuries, so they're not theoretical or modern, but somehow it's been called modern monetary theory. Anyway, right then, where to start, really? Sorry, I've kind of just dried up temporarily, really. It's...
Post-Edinburgh brain farts.
What? Say again?
Post-Edinburgh brain farts. You're chilling out, having just come back from the Edinburgh Festival. That's what we'll put it down to.
Yeah. If I want to pay you money, if I want you to do something for me, Jim, why do you accept my money? You accept my money because you're going to be able to exchange it for goods and services. Why do the people that take it off you accept it? Because of the same reason. They'll be able to exchange it for goods and services because it's become currency. When you work it all back, the idea is that the reason that the thing that makes money is because your taxes are due in money, that are due in pounds. So you have to, that's the government raises a tax. And, it used to be that, so basically the government raises a tax. So it doesn't matter if we've been trading shells or gold or something like that. At the end of the day, we have to find pounds to pay the government in tax. And that's about it, really. If I take my money that I owe to the government to the Treasury in pounds, they will. What are they going to do with it? They create them on a computer out of thin air. They don't need my pounds. They would shred it if I took it into the Treasury. So that's basically the story of money. It's created by, government spending, and it's destroyed by taxation. If there's too much aggregate demand, if there are too many pounds in everybody's pockets and prices start shooting up, the idea is that you raise taxes to reduce aggregate demand, to take the heat out of the economy. They're destroying money, and if we're going into a recession, not enough money's being spent. The gears are seizing up. The government is supposed to use a Keynesian stimulus to create money to boost the economy, and that's it. And what's happened is that the certain ideologues have gotten hold of the idea that money's that there's a thing called a deficit. Now, if the government spends more money than it taxes out of the economy, which is a good thing, right? Because that's our money that they've spent into the economy. We're using that for our goods and services. Then there's a deficit between what they've taxed out of the economy and spent into the economy, and they've come to sort of use this as look, there's this thing called a deficit, and they start calling it a debt. And the government is a household that goes into debt, and it's not really a debt. It's just a disparity it's a good disparity between what they've spent into the economy and what they're taking out of the economy. And so they've used that as we're in debt. They've used it in this way. They're trying to tell people that we're in debt. So, we've got to have hard times. You've got to be laid off. Everybody's got to work for lower wages. We can't afford the NHS, we can't afford this, that, and the other. And, everybody, the right people have run with that idea, and we're suffering immensely because of it.
Yeah.
It's not helped by the fact that in Europe they're having a massive problem because they're not sovereign in their own currency. All of the member states of the European Union don't create their own currency. We do, we are, and so does the United States. And just like, I live in Islington Council, if they don't have enough money, they can go bankrupt. They have to borrow it. But our country doesn't have to borrow money from it. Where does it borrow pounds from? Who's responsible for the creation of pounds? There's nowhere it can borrow it from. It just creates it. So the European states can't create their own money. If they can't find enough euros to, fund what they're trying to fund, they then have to borrow it. And that's why they're in trouble. If the Greeks could just print, in inverted commas, drachma when they needed some government spending, well, they would be able to do that. But as it is, they have to go to the European Central Bank, and the European Central Bank aren't treating them very well, and people are, starving.
And the people involved in that banking system can then go and buy Greece up for pennies on the pound.
Well, that's it, exactly. So it's kind of, it's a great racket to get into, really. It's nearly hilarious. Yeah. It's like we're just going to create this magic token out of thin air, and you're going to become sort of, slaves.
Yeah, literally slaves. Often when... Well, used to, not so much now, actually. When people used to first listen to me have a good old moan about this kind of stuff, like, after a gig or something like that, people would come up to me and they said, so basically, Jim, you're a communist. And I've said, no, mate, I'm a capitalist. It's just that the system you're working under isn't capitalism. And I would explain to them in this way. I said, imagine if, like, in a country, an island, for example, that money grew on trees, and everyone just walked down the street. When they wanted money, they just picked up the leaves off the trees and it was worth money. Well, you'd have a problem with inflation right there. But then imagine if just only after a sort of 10 years or so, the rich bloke down the other end of the estate said, do you know what? I'm going to ban all the other money growing on all the other trees, and I'm going to make it a crime for you to pick that money off the trees, but I'm going to still be allowed to do it. That's what you've got in a banking system where certain people are allowed to create money and certain people are not. And then add to that, after a while, the rich bloke down the streets that can grow money on trees and has stopped you from being able to do so, in fact made it illegal if you pick it from the trees because it's called counterfeiting, he's then gone to you and gone, I've run out of money. Give me what's left of yours, and then you give it to him, and then he says, oh, what, you got no money now? I'll lend it back to you at interest. That is what's happened in Britain. What would you say to that little story, Christian?
I think that is a very, very good depiction of what's happening. I think that's a very good way of framing it, to think about it.
These people, when I explain it to them, their face sort of looks at me like I'm insane, but it's all there, it's all there.
Yeah, no, but I think the people, when people sort of look at us and think, oh, well, we're insane, I think it's a signpost. It's like, right, okay, well, we've got to think of another way to say it yet again, because this problem's not going away, and we're only empowering, our adversaries by not finding the right way to say it. And I can't. Unfortunately, I'm thinking aloud here, which is not a great sound. But I think it's about trying to arouse people's curiosity. Really, I think it's very hard to just say, look, the way you've been thinking about the world is completely wrong, and you're wrong. People just go, no, you're wrong straight away. They're just in a corner, and I think it's about kind of just going. Thinking back to the moment where you got curious about how money worked. What was it that lit that spark? Lit that spark, but provided. Yeah, I don't know. Provided that moment where you just thought, oh, I need to find out about this. We've got to try and make those moments happen. Really, I think I can't think of a better word, but as activists on this topic, and I do think it's a very big and hard part of activism is the consciousness raising. I think, and some people are really, really good at it, and it shouldn't be underestimated, really, because when things change, it's because consciousness has been changed, like mass consciousness has been changed. All of a sudden, people aren't thinking of say slaves, like literal slaves, chattel slavery. Consciousness changed. Now we look back and think, oh, people that kept slaves were racist, and maybe very late on, maybe you could say, right, they knew, but they were going, no, I bought some property. You're asking me to set my property free. That's the way they framed it. That's the way they thought about it. And obviously, of course, it's racist to think that another human being could be property. But it wasn't even framed that way. People just didn't have the level of consciousness to even frame it that way. And people who framed it that way initially were, beyond the pale. And,
conspiracy theorists.
Radical. And I think at the root of what we're saying now is, if you think it through, again, this is a way of going back to serfdom and enslaving people.
Yeah.
There was a point where, as wage slaves, we were getting, more comfortable wages, and we were probably going on holidays and enjoying life and stuff. And there was, now is the moment, where just masses of wealth has just been wiped off balance sheets, and they're taking it out of your pocket. So, now is the moment where people should be curious about why that happened, and therefore what is money.
Yeah.
And and so now is a good moment. But if the level of consciousness and education around the topic is low, then the spark won't find any dry, timber.
Well, I think that spark is where people in the first world, money has represented over the last maybe century or so a level of comfort, but now money represents life or death. It's often represented life or death in the third world. The money to build a water well could mean the difference between life and death. But now it's been comfort over the last sort of, at least half century or so, something like that, at least since World War II, in the First World here in Britain. And now it is, I'm sorry, we don't have money to keep you alive. It would be easier if we now terminated your thing. And we've things like the Liverpool care pathway, for example, where it's, I'm sorry, it's more cost efficient to, effectively kill that patient right here and now rather than try and prolong their life or offer alternative treatment. So I think where we see that horrendous tragedy, we can turn that tragedy into an opportunity to say to people, the reason people are dying is because there isn't enough money, correct? Well, money can be created out of nothing, so we need to have a sit down with the people and really have a think about what money is, because otherwise your relative's going to be put on that so-called care pathway. Yeah.
I think that's the double whammy, is that at times when people might be curious, they're too busy having to pedal very, very hard to stand still. On the treadmill.
Yes, on the hamster wheel.
Financially, so they haven't got the time for the consciousness raising, which is, it's a bit of a conundrum, really. Yeah,
that's certainly a fair point. But that's what slaves are like, isn't it? They have no free time. That's why they're slaves. They are there purely to exist as a purpose, unfortunately. But I think if we can get through to enough people that have that tragedy, but also have the time to reflect on that, and then they can at some point try. I mean, we are making progress. I think
absolutely, yeah. When it's become possible for it to be a main, it's becoming a more mainstream opinion now. Basically, the modern monetary theory stuff. It's just glacial. That's the problem. The pace of change it can only, it's very hard to accelerate it, I think.
Yes, but it is a huge admission. It was a real victory when that article came out in The Guardian, where they basically said, because me and you have been saying for a long time, and others that we learn from have been saying it for a long time, that, hey, this is not a theory, guys. This really is. I mean, the whole idea of austerity is completely blown out of the window. And austerity is affecting everyone in this country in one way or another. It's the comedy numbers in our industry have dropped off. My local maternity ward has been closed down. Every public sector has been cut back. Strikes have resulted. People's pensions have been taken away. Firefighters have said that the level of service is, going to diminish, and that, fire is very, very bad once it spreads. We all know that. We're at that point now where the whole idea of austerity is completely and utterly pointless unless your job as a government is designed to enslave your population by making them borrow something you can create out of nothing, and then enslave them and their generations afterwards by making them pay it back. It really is quite naked for me to see now, and I think that once people get their head around that theory, it's quite naked for others to see, and it's a testament to the moaning that you and I and other people have done.
I guess that's what I've kind of lost sight of recently. I don't really want it's not very interesting to talk about sort of personal stuff, but I think I got exasperated with the just you just couldn't really reach anyone. But then I'm thinking, well, that's obviously that you do eventually. Like you say, the Guardian article is a massive victory, and now it's a question of you just said if people understand this, if more people understand this, and that's my sticking point, really. It's a big if. We still need more, I think.
Oh, absolutely. The mainstream media, like you said, whenever they have these so-called economists on, I just see him as Baghdad Bob. That person that just said, Saddam Hussein is great, we're winning the war, and all behind him, everything is exploding as the Allies storm through, and people are just laughing. People who are in the know are just laughing in his face. The same thing. That's what it is now. The mainstream media to me is a great deal of propaganda on a variety of issues, but never more so than money. I can't watch Question Time anymore when they're all talking about austerity and all the. It is pointless. It is and most of those politicians up there, they have no idea how utterly pointless their statements are, and they honestly believe we're in a capitalist society. But you cannot live in it. It's not a capitalist society. It's a fascist society. When you've got the merger of state and corporations designed to screw over a people, that's a tyranny. It's not a capitalist society. Capitalism is where money is traded. It's not created by a certain elite group and then lent to the peasants at interest. That's not capitalism.
Well, I guess it's never really existed in that case, because money's never existed without authority. Money's never existed without a monopoly on force.
Yeah.
So capitalism being associated with freedom, I think we need to make the break there. We need to cut the cord. It's just not, and particularly when you get to finance capitalism, it's just a joke. But I think a good place to start is the 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism, with the book by what's his name, Ha-Joon Chang. But it's easy to remember the title of the book. It was a bestseller a couple of years ago. 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism, and it's very interesting. And I think point one is there's never been a free market. They're always controlled.
Yeah.
Let's say you can't get a person to understand that money only exists because a power like a government has a monopoly on force in a certain geographical area. That's why money exists. If you can't get somebody to understand that, maybe the next thing you could say is, well, let's talk about, markets, the Adam Smith idea of that markets work because everybody pursuing their own self-interest will, will eventually lead to a good outcome, basically. It's like people voting with their money, basically. Good things will get funded, bad things won't get funded, only good things will exist. Well, how about this? I've got this idea that a great way for me to make money is to go across the road to my neighbour's house and kill him and take all his stuff. And, I'll be using my comparative advantage, which is like surprise and weaponry. And do you know what happens when I try and do that? The nanny state intervenes. The nanny state says, no, you can't do that because it's immoral. Not because it's inefficient or there's some utilitarian ground for me not murdering him and taking all his stuff. It's because it's not moral. So the market in this case is controlled, and it's controlled by what people think is moral. So, when arch capitalists talk about, forget about morals and stuff like that. It's all about, free trade of goods and services, and that's what our capitalist system's founded on. No, it's actually it's got a moral framework. Another great idea I've just had for making a load of money. I think I might get some hydroponic gear and grow a load of dope in my attic and sell it. It will cost me hardly, I think I can make a profit that way. I go, well, guess what happens? The nanny state intervenes. They come in and say, no, you can't do that because those things that you're selling, we've decided as a society it's immoral for you to get. People addicted to stuff. So again, the nanny state. Same with, I think I might be able to convince, my girlfriend to, be a companion to men or something for some money because we need the money. Guess what? The nanny state comes in and goes, oh, that's immoral. You can't force people to, sell them like slaves. That's immoral. So, let's just understand that the market is rigged.
Yep.
You know, there are things you can do and there are things you can't do, and we do, to some extent, decide that as moral people, to the extent that we've got a democracy.
I agree with you, Christian. The government hates criminals because government hates competition.
Exactly. They want their criminal enterprises to be the only ones on the block, basically.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you've got a great idea for, like, not killing your neighbour and taking all this stuff, but if you've got a great idea for, like, maybe killing a whole nation of people and taking all their stuff, that might get funded, you know, that might roll.
Yeah.
You know.
But even if you wanted to, you know, make lemonade from lemons, right? Health and safety check.
Is that right?
Yeah, you know, if you wanted to go and grow wheat and corn just from a field using sunshine, well, how many rich farmers do you know? I know a few, and they're not. And how is it? Because the nanny state intervenes, exactly like you said.
Yeah. So I just think, well, you know, it's not a nanny state. It's a state. You know that we've, you know, for better or worse, it's got some rules that we'd like to change, and it's an evolving thing. I think the problem is it stopped evolving in a populist way because it stopped evolving in a way that's involving the public because they've become more and more disengaged. And for the people that write the rules, that's great news. You know, the more people who, you know, don't care what's going on in Westminster and you know, don't want to affect it, that's a win for them. You know?
Yeah.
That's why I have mixed feelings about, say, Russell Brand saying, well, you know, elections aren't changing anything, and that's why I don't vote. I get where he's coming from.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that's the right time because people are apathetic enough. He's just handed them an excuse to get more apathetic.
Yeah, what I've always said about Russell Brand is I agree with his analysis of the problems and I disagree with his analysis of the solutions.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he has certainly woken a few people up to the idea that corporations run governments and that democracy does not run the governments. But his solutions. I mean, my solutions always are to people is go and learn how to run for a councillor and run for an MP. And most people will probably think, well, unless you're one of the main parties, you're not going to win. Now, whatever you think about UKIP, that shows that people can come from somewhere with an idea, whether you agree with it or not, and shake up the system. So if everyone was to go and create a stand as an...
UKIP are activists.
Yeah, they're activists.
They're activists with a bit of money. The people can learn a lot from them.
Yeah, they're activists who I think have got some good ideas and some bad ideas, and I think they've got some good people in their parties. And I've met them, and they supported my help support the protest at Bilderberg, and they've got some nasty people in their party, I think, that say some stupid things. However, I'd like to point out, and I'm not saying this is the case, I'm just saying this is just as a theory, if I was one of the big parties and I could see a threat to my monopoly of political paradigm, you know, full spectral dominance, what I would do is pick my most nasty person that I know and say, hey, are you still a racist bigot? Can you go and join that party and keep your mouth shut for about 2 years, and then, right, I'm going to put you on my mate's media company and just be you. And, you know, make certain you've got the flags all behind you and everything like that, so you're a full-fledged paid-up member of the party, and just say everything that you've wanted to say, mate, over the last few years, and just say it publicly. That's how I would bring down an enemy from within. That's how Sun Tzu described to do it in The Art of War thousands of years ago. It's asymmetrical warfare, pretending to be your enemy's friend in order to do damage with the most small amount of confrontation.
It's possible. It might even be likely, but I don't even think they need to do that. I think, when an organisation brands itself the way they have, it's going to attract, you know, some of those fringe elements that are motivated by maybe, you know, xenophobia.
Yeah.
And you know, and we know the media is really, you know, because of the, you know, Chomsky-Herman analysis of the media, and we know that it's not telling, the media's not telling lies, in a way that a person would tell lies. It's just institutionally, emphasizing these people, de-emphasizing these people, and therefore, you get, right, this is the picture of UKIP you get. And they do it with parties to the left as well. Or, let's say a million people march because we don't want to bomb Iraq. Some newspapers will make sure the pictures they take of the demonstrators, they're going to try and get the ones where people have got Mohicans and, all of that.
Oh, yeah.
T-shirts with slogans on and things like that. And, whereas, anybody who was there in 2003 would be like, no, your grandma was there. Everyone was there. And it's those kind of things, really. It's those sort of subtle things that editors have that kind of control over it, don't they?
There's some footage of the Bilderberg protest thing that I helped organise the comedy for last year, and I wasn't there for the first 2 days, but a friend of mine was pointing out that you have got at that protest, a small group of people that think the world is run by shape-shifting lizards. And, they turn up with the masks and all of that. And you could just watch them. Now, who knows whether these people were genuine or whether they were paid to by media companies. But you could just watch them. And it was on YouTube. They've got the photos. They go, watch the BBC interviews those people. That is what they'll represent that these people are. And there were only about 2 of them out of about several thousand. But you just knew they were the ones that are going to be interviewed. And the fact is that you can put a YouTube video showing that, saying that, going, watch the BBC go and interview him, watch it, and that goes on YouTube quicker and gets more views than a lot of people that are interested in this sort of stuff watch the 6 o'clock news to watch. And so as a result, the BBC were just discredited before they even had a chance to put their propaganda out. And but I know exactly what you're saying. That's how the media works. It's a very selective. It's less media for me and more propaganda. It's propaganda where they select who they want. This is welcome to the 6 o'clock news. This is the selected items we've chosen to choose to tell you what to think. That's what it is to me, the 6 o'clock news these days.
That's why I like the Chomsky, Noam Chomsky, Ed Herman idea, and he got the idea from some work that another Australian academic was doing into the media. This guy was called Alex Carey, Carey, and he started writing. He started preparing ideas that Chomsky took with and Ed Herman and worked together to become the book Manufacturing Consent. And I like it because it's not a bunch of guys getting together in a mysterious room and going, look, this is what this is the way we're going to tell this story. It nearly is. but it's more. My favourite way of understanding it is when you buy The Guardian. I'm using The Guardian because it's a left-wing paper as opposed to a right or a supposedly liberal paper. When you buy The Guardian, you're not the customer; you're the product. Your eyeballs have been served up to the real customer. The person that pays for it. Or is the advertiser.
Mm-hmm.
That's who's paid for it to be printed. You're kind of subsidising it a little bit with the money that you've paid, but it really doesn't need you to exist. And that's why a lot of newspapers are free. They're just coming out and doing it. It's so you as an audience are the product of the newspaper, and then if the newspaper can refine the product, i.e. get an audience that has got more money to spend, more disposable income, then it gets to charge more for its ads. So it's constantly trying to refine you. Now, not you as a person and make you earn more money, but maybe if you don't earn so much money, or you don't fall into their sort of affluent demographic or whatever, then they're trying to, they're not interested in you. They don't want to cultivate you as an audience. So it's bye you and hello somebody else. So that's kind of what newspapers are in the business of doing. They're not in the business of informing people. That comes second. So, if certain things are, perhaps giving the correct weight to the impending climate catastrophe, actual present and impending climate catastrophe, if those things aren't palatable to their customers, the advertisers, they're going to de-emphasize it. They can't just lie about it, because they've got to pretend that to the product, that's us, that they're becoming informed people, to get them to read the newspaper, to sell you to their advertisers. So they can't lie about it, but they've got to find a way of presenting it so it's not going to turn off their advertisers, and it's not going to turn off you, their product. And therefore it takes away this need for, because I think it makes people turn off and think that you're a conspiracy theorist or something like that. If you start, the media's doing this and the media's controlling that. It's like these are just the institutional facts of how the Guardian is funded. You don't have to believe in sort of evil people or anything like that. It's just like there are just people and incentives. And so the editor has all these incentives. And so it doesn't really matter if it's the Dalai Lama or anything in the paper, it's going to get printed the same way. So every story goes through this filtering process. Every fact, goes through this filtering process, and then you end up with the kind of coverage that you get. So, you end up with, on any issue, from Gaza to climate change, you end up with a kind of corporate-friendly story.
Yeah, whenever you've got, and this brings us back into the original of how money is used as a controlling system, not just to enslave people physically in terms of work, but also, potentially enslave their minds. When you've got a situation where the advertisers are usually big corporations which are listed on stock markets, of which the major investors are the banks. So you've got, are you going to get a message that's going to get you a story that's going to be able to break their monopoly on money supply? Now, whether it's you're not going to get that from someone that's the major advertiser, because whether it's a major pharmaceutical or a chemical company or household products company, these corporations are usually, even the smaller ones, are usually owned by some of the bigger ones, and you'll be amazed at how much the big corporations of the brands they actually own. It's not just their own, they own subsidiary companies, and they are in turn have major shareholders as by way of banks, and it's invested in pensions and all that sort of thing. So eventually it comes back to the banks over and over again. Are the advertisers going to send a non-bank friendly message? And the answer is usually no, which is why The Guardian was such a victory, because there comes a point where the Bravo Sierra that they push out can no longer be sustained by the product that you're saying. Yeah, Yeah, I'm allowed to say these things on the radio. It's all about the truth here. And do you know why? Do you know why? Because I don't take a penny and there's no advertiser, so I can say what the hell I like, and that's why I like doing it. And it's probably why no one's offered to pay me any money. And people go, "Oh, good show! I can't believe that some of the other radio stations where you are haven't wanted to pick you up." I'm like, I can.
You do make a good point. I follow, I'm not sure if you do, Media Lens, MediaLens.org, and I donate to them. They're donor funded, and their idea is, when this sort of skewed coverage comes out, on the BBC, it's usually the BBC and the Guardian, because that's where they set the bounds of permissible thought. My favourite framing is of the Guardian BBC axis is when they look back at the invasion of Iraq and they say, was it a war crime? Was it what was it? How do they frame it? Was it a blunder? Was it a mistake? Do you know what I mean? Or was it justified? They're sort of, those are the poles of opinion, in the sort of left liberal intelligentsia. Hang on a second, there's a third option, definitely, that it was a war crime, a premeditated war crime. And when you've got the left-wing paper not going as far as that, that's kind of truncated a whole, part of the spectrum of ideas about, military aggression perpetrated by us.
Well, something
it's cut that out of the debate because on the right wing are like, oh, we should have stayed in longer, we should bomb more, we should, and left wing people are going, well, we meant well, but these people, they're just not ready for democracy. Oh well, and they, and it's like no, you actually didn't mean well. A lot of brave people's sons and daughters got sent over there to die for very shady reasons, and even now they can't hold their hand up and say, well, they were responsible for it. They printed the 30-minute claim. They you know what I mean? It was a Guardian BBC led war.
Yeah, and let me take that one step further. So you've got a situation where the people that have printed it have made money because everyone wants to know, we might potentially be under attack in 30 minutes. That's something of interest to everyone. And then their main advertisers would include the banks. And one of the beneficiaries of the Iraq incident was JP Morgan, who inherited the right to run the central bank for Iraq, a la, as we've talked about, the right to print money. And, of course, JP Morgan is a major financial institution that holds shares in a number of companies that will invest in the papers that sold the initial headline that you read. And just as a little footnote, Tony Blair receives a salary after he's left Prime Minister from JP Morgan. You see, the corruption, it all dovetails in within itself, isn't it? When you look at the the work of Bill Still and Money Masters and The Secret of Oz, the history of money, and I think one of my favourite phrases is history doesn't repeat, but it does often rhyme. It's quite amazing. We've got various levels of people thinking about to the extent to which this is a coincidence or a conspiracy, and if it is a conspiracy, how far you want to go down that rabbit hole. But what can't really be denied is that the system really does stink, and it quite stinks in quite an obvious way at this point. We do have a very serious problem. Do you find people are starting to get a little bit more aware that the fact... Because I would put it to you, for the whole Iraq thing that you made earlier, and I agreed with every word you said, that was it a mistake? Because you talked about the options, didn't it? Was it a mistake? Was it a premeditated war crime? Was it an accident? I always say, look at the people that have made the mistake. Did they profit from that mistake? And was there a cover-up involved in that mistake? Do you get the feeling these people are lying to you in their mistake? And those are usually the three sort of signs for me. Are they covering it up? I.e., do they get their pals that you can quite visibly see are their pals to do the investigation? And, when we say investigation, Tony Blair had to go before an inquiry. He didn't have to go before a jury of his peers with a potential sentence waving over his head. He just had to go to an inquiry. Whereas if you and I were to... go and go and work for a comedy promoter who puts us in a room of 300 people and says, look, I'm going to really profit if tonight you just take a machine gun out and just mow the whole audience down, and then we go before an inquiry saying it was a mistake and there's a load of money in our bank accounts. We wouldn't have that right. And of course we're laughing, but it wasn't 300 people that died. It was over 1 million, and including our armed forces who were sent into those situations very poorly equipped, because apparently we didn't have the money that we couldn't print out of nothing to give to them to buy the body armour. They had to buy their own stuff. I mean, it's the whole system really is rotting quite publicly. Well, actually, though,
this might be where you and I differ. I always think that the system's working fine for the people who designed it.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's actually, and I think that goes back to, I think that might be another Adam Smith one. The architects of a system make sure their own needs are peculiarly well attended to.
Yeah.
I think that's about one of the truest statements I've ever read, really.
Yeah, I
think you can look at that if you couple that with Thucydides, the strong do as they please, the weak suffer as they must. If you put those two things together, you've basically got the laws of global politics.
Yeah, pretty much. In fact, I've started to do a new joke, and it's not a big rib tickler, but it's one that I believe in, because I do quite a lot of political stuff when I do a set, not so much when I'm comparing, when I'm doing a set, and I say to people, having just slated the entire political system, I say to people, I actually think David Cameron is doing a fantastic job as Prime Minister. He just doesn't work for us. He works for his friends and financiers. And I think the audiences, some laugh, some don't, but all of them seem to nod. And they're starting to get with that now.
Yeah, okay.
And
that's good news. That is good news. Yeah, I think, that is. It's just, but I think what I take away from that is, these systems are functional, but they're, how do we become the people that they function for?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the way we need to frame it, and become more of a constituency.
Yeah. It comes back to what you were saying about slavery. One of the reasons that I think slavery was brought down was two reasons. One, as you talked about, the consciousness awareness came through, and people who weren't the slaves looked at that and thought, man, that's some bad mojo karma, I don't really want to be part of that system. And the second part of that is the people who were slaves were looking at themselves thinking, man, we're slaves. We don't want to be slaves. Now, you can eliminate both those problems if you can convince people that they're enslave them without thinking that they're slaves. For example, you live in a free market system. There's money.
This is the birth of money.
Exactly. That's exactly it. One of the biggest financial economy in the world, this sort of system, probably one of the systems that we may have had probably the closest to capitalism was, the United States system pre-1913, the Federal Reserve, the creature from Jekyll Island kind of thing, when they created the Federal Reserve, and of course that they essentially brought the Bank of England model, created I think in the 17th century, to the United States, the greatest economy the world had ever known at the time, and then it sort of filtered in from there. So when have we had capitalism? That guy that you quoted, I wasn't familiar with that book, but he's probably right. We probably never have had a capitalist society. But if you can convince them that they have, and that they're poor because it's their fault, then you get less rebellions, and you get less people rebelling on their behalf as well.
And that's where we are, isn't it? And I think if you come at capitalism from, or what we're calling capitalism, this system that we're under now, as a sort of thing that was given to us by monarchs, so we were ruled by an absolute monarchy, and people were like, this is just not fair, Eventually they went, all right, well look, you can have this little talking shop, we'll call it Parliament, parlay, talking. You can have that, and you get to talk about what's fair and not fair and everything. Well, we'll still have all the stuff, but you guys get to talk, and then, you can vote who your leader is, and so we'll still have all the stuff, but you guys talk about it, and vote for your leader, in quote unquote, And it's a little bit, when we look at Iran, we go, how ridiculous is it they have elections, look, they have a supreme leader, and we don't look at our own system and go, it's ridiculous that we have elections and we have a monarchy.
Yeah.
It's the same bloody thing,
It's fun. I've actually just been starting doing a joke a couple of weeks ago where I say to the audience, let me explain how royalty works in this country. My mum's better than your mum. Now give me some cash. That's kind of how it works. And the audiences are sort of laughing at it. But then they're sort of laughing, thinking, yeah, actually, I feel a little bit hard done by. So, Christian, I don't usually have guests on for this long, but I've enjoyed this chat so long, so I'm just going to dedicate the whole show to you now. In the closing 10 minutes that we have, Could you explain to people the sources that you think are best available for them to be able to get the information out, and what you think the possible solutions out of our enslavement are?
Okay, well, I think the best source is obviously the best way to do it is just be curious. It's really hard because it just gets knocked out of you very easily from you're at school. If you're obedient, you get promoted, and you get told you're clever, and then when you go to work, same thing happens, and your curiosity kind of leaves you, and you don't even realize. So, maybe be curious about what money is and try and answer the question for yourself. Now, if you're interested in that, I would say, just go on iTunes, look at Reform the Money, and have a look at that. But so that that's where we started talking about stuff, was about modern monetary theory, and I think that's a great way to just give it a listen. Most people have the radio droning on in the background all the time. Anyway, why not try and listen to something that might help you understand things? That's advice I would give. Also, after that, I would go to the Media Lens website and sign up for the Media Lens alerts, because I think they're very good at, singling out a news story and going, well, look, this is the way this has been framed, and, we think it's inaccurate, and it's also pernicious, so I think we should, you can get engaged that way by, writing to editors, in a polite way. Activism is good like that. It helps you to understand what you think. You might not agree with it, but that's the great thing about the journey that you're on. You've got to engage with it first, and find out whether you can make a difference just through legitimate channels. Because the thing about the BBC, if they frame something badly, and as a result people suffer and die, like Gaza, then they're a public body, they're accountable, so we can make them accountable through activism that isn't just lying down in front of tanks. So I think a very that's very entry level stuff, and I find it fascinating to read as well, and there are stories on it. They have a message board on it. Says medialens.org. They have a message board and forums that's very lively, and there are stories on there of activism that's worked. As sure as we're here now with more freedom than our counterparts 1,000 years ago, the activism has worked. That's where all our freedom comes from.
Yeah.
Rights are never gifted from above. They're won by hard struggle. They're snatched from below. Takes a lot of organised people to beat a little bit of organised money, and I would say those are two very good sources. And the idea is with Media Lens, they're not saying, you should not read the newspaper or watch the BBC. It's like it's learning how to watch and read the mainstream media and put it into context.
Decode it.
It's sort of like intellectual self-defense against propaganda. So you can read it and kind of go, I kind of know. Being able to read between the lines, I kind of know what's going on here now, because
seeing the agenda.
It's a little bit like if you were to watch Press TV, the Iranian public broadcaster, run sort of the Iranian state broadcaster, and they did a story about how great the president of Iran was. You'd go, well, that's the state broadcaster talking, and you'd be able to see if what it is. Ditto in Russia, about Putin or something like that. We'd be able to go. We'd be able to contextualize it instantly, and we never seem to be able to do it for our own media. And I think that's what we need to learn to do, really. Just learn what its priorities are and get very familiar with them. It's not about get out there and smash this and tear that down. It's just about developing a bit of I guess intellectual self-defense against these things, because they're kind of here to stay. I think propaganda is kind of here to stay. People, everybody's had an experience of telling a white lie. So we kind of know where propaganda comes from and how people are able to do it with great ease. It's kind of here to stay. So if you want to be informed, you've kind of got to accept that it exists.
Yeah.
And think, okay, now it exists. What do I do? How do I become informed? I think there's a way of thinking about these things.
Yeah. Any good documentaries on YouTube that you recommend?
I haven't seen anything later, but I've just been. You know what it's like in August when you go up to that festival.
Yeah.
If it's not up my ass, I haven't seen it.
I would say to people that the Money Masters is a good place to start.
Absolutely,
the Wizards of Oz.
Absolutely, Money Masters.
Wizards of Oz.
I think actually they should put that on an MP3 as well, because it's very good. It's good to listen to as well.
Made in '96, it's so prophetic and.
But because the story that is describing is kind of. It's very, very old.
Yeah.
And it's very old, and it hasn't changed because the story hasn't been told. It is literally the story of where money comes from. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The Money Masters is brilliant. It's long, so I think he worked quite hard to find a way to tell the story more succinctly. Bill Still, and so he kind of did a redo of it. I can't remember what year it was, but it was called The Secret of Oz. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that one yet, Jim?
I have seen it. I got the title wrong. It's not The Wizards of Oz, it's The Secret of Oz. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, The Secret of Oz. So, and again, I mean, I think this is great. But the idea that what's his name? William L. Baum, the guy who wrote The Wizard of Oz, was a money activist.
Mm-hmm.
And wrote the story of The Wizard of Oz to tell the story of money, which I think is amazing. And some people have gone, it's a conspiracy theory, but if you go, if you dig deep, it's not even deep. If you actually find out about it, it really is true that it's The Wizard of Oz is the story of money.
Yes.
And Bill Still, unpacks that for us in. The Secret of Oz. And I think another great thing that you can do is listen to Democracy Now! Every day.
Yeah, I play a lot of their clips on this program.
Because I just think it's an hour of news, and if you've got this theory that an informed person reads the Telegraph and the Guardian and everything in between, then you really are not experiencing the full spectrum of coverage unless you're listening to or watching Democracy Now! Every day, or I just think they're part of the news spectrum, and you're kind of caught in ignorance if you don't.
Yeah, I've
watch it.
I've played a number of their clips on this show. I like that, and of course, continue to listen to this show. I would say to people as well.
I would totally say. Sorry, Jim, I've been really behind the beat on this one. But absolutely. Yeah, but that's the other thing. It's like you find it, and the other thing that I've also come to understand. I think I understand this is if you. It's not about going. Oh, right, yeah, I see how things work now. I'm going to tell everyone. You might not be able to do that. It's more about why not tell one person that you kind of know feels like you. I've discovered this thing, and they go, yeah, but now you've basically doubled the number of people that feel like you about a certain thing. Yeah. Rather than I need to just go tell it on the mountain and tell everybody. It's like think who can I influence? Yeah. Who can who do I have that depth? Who do I have that quality of connection with? Rather than number of connections.
Yeah.
I think it might be about that, the quality of an engagement rather than hitting the masses.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
It makes sense. I always, when it comes to the masses, I always think to myself, I'm not going to tell them what to think. I just want to tell them that they should think, and that it's more important how to think than what to think, and do your own research, and that's what I always say to people. So just any closing comments, Christian Riley? What's your website so people can come and see you live, mate?
My website is christianriley.co.uk.
Do you want to spell that for people?
Riley is spelled the Irish way, Reilly.
Is that where the fighting spirit comes from?
Say again?
Is that where the fighting spirit comes from?
Yeah.
All right then, Christian. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Thank you for giving us over an hour of your time, and look forward to talking to you again in the future. And thanks for listening to the show.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Cheers, mate. All the best. All right, pal. Bye-bye. So there goes Christian Riley. We thank him very much for joining us here tonight on the show. That brings us to the end of our broadcast here at Beyond the News. Check us out at beyondthenews.co.uk, and all the articles that we mentioned and videos can be found on our news site. You might need to scroll down a bit, but hey, we never said this was going to be easy, and it does take a bit of time to do some research. So thanks for listening. And on next week's show, why don't I play that Secrets of Oz documentary, at least some of it, eh? Why not? I'll do that next week. Cheers. Bye-bye.